The Philadelphia Eagles may have quietly uncovered one of the most dangerous defensive weapons in the entire NFL, and somehow, not enough people are talking about it. While most of the headlines continue to focus on names like Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, and Jalen Carter, there is another player inside this roster who is rapidly becoming one of the most impactful defenders on the team. And the scary part for the rest of the league is that he still feels like a player who is only scratching the surface of what he can become. That player is Jalen Hunt. If you look closely at what happened during the 2025 season, the numbers are honestly shocking considering how little national attention he received. Jalen Hunt finished the year leading the Eagles in sacks with 6.5, but that alone does not fully explain how disruptive he became inside Vic Fangio's defense. What really stands out is the total impact he had across multiple areas of the field. This is not just a pass rusher who can get after the quarterback. This is a defender with a completely unique background that allows him to play the game differently from almost every other edge rusher in football. And here is where the story becomes even more interesting for Eagles fans. A lot of people still do not realize that Jalen Hunt originally began his college football career as a safety at Cornell before eventually transferring to Houston Christian and converting into an edge rusher. That defensive back experience completely changed the way he sees the game. It gave him instincts and awareness that most pass rushers simply do not have. You could see it throughout the season whenever he dropped into coverage, diagnosed plays, or reacted to quarterbacks trying to escape pressure. The perfect example came from one unbelievable statistic that almost sounds fake at first glance. Not only did Jalen Hunt lead the Eagles in sacks during 2025, but he also led the team in interceptions. Think about that for a second. The Eagles had elite talent throughout the secondary, including all-pro level cornerbacks, yet it was an edge rusher who finished at the top in interceptions with 3. That tells you everything about the type of athlete he is becoming. He is not just winning with effort or scheme. He is reading offenses, understanding quarterback tendencies, and using his athletic background to create turnovers in ways very few defensive linemen can. And once the playoffs arrived, Eagles fans started seeing flashes of a player who could eventually become one of the centerpieces of this defense for years to come. During the postseason, and especially in the Super Bowl run, Jalen Hunt was part of a relentless defensive front that overwhelmed opposing offenses. His speed off the edge, his bend around tackles, and his ability to close space quickly made life miserable for quarterbacks. What made it even more dangerous was how unpredictable he became inside Fangio's system. One play, he is attacking downhill as a pure pass rusher. The next play, he is dropping into coverage and taking away passing lanes. That versatility is exactly why the Eagles coaching staff appears so excited about his future entering 2026. And when you look at the advanced metrics, the breakout becomes impossible to ignore. Among players drafted in the 2024 NFL draft class, Jalen Hunt finished with the highest pressure rate in 2025 at 16.9%. That placed him ahead of several highly celebrated defensive players across the league. For a third-round selection, that is an incredible development for Philadelphia. It is another reminder of how effective Howie Roseman has become at identifying talent outside the first round. In fact, this entire situation feels like another example of the Eagles front office seeing something before everybody else did. When Philadelphia drafted Hunt, many people viewed him as a developmental project because he was still relatively new to playing edge rusher full-time. But internally, the Eagles clearly believed his athletic traits, intelligence, and versatility gave him enormous upside. Now, after only a short time in the league, that belief is starting to look completely justified. Even Vic Fangio, who is not known for constantly praising players publicly, recently made it clear that he believes Hunt is only going to continue improving. That matters because Fangio does not hand out compliments casually. When a defensive coordinator with his experience speaks positively about a young defender, people inside the building pay attention. What should also excite Eagles fans is the environment around Hunt heading into 2026. Philadelphia continues building one of the deepest defensive fronts in football, with names like Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, Josh Uche, and the newly added veterans expected to rotate throughout the front seven. Offenses are going to have enormous difficulty focusing protection on just one player. That creates even more opportunities for Hunt to attack one-on-one matchups and continue developing into a nightmare for opposing quarterbacks. And maybe the most impressive part of all this is how under the radar he still feels nationally. Inside Philadelphia, fans are beginning to recognize what is happening, but outside the city, many people still have no idea how impactful Jix Hunt became last season. The Eagles may genuinely have one of the NFL's biggest hidden stars preparing for a massive breakout in 2026. So now the big question becomes this: if Jix Hunt already led the Eagles in sacks and interceptions while still developing as a player, just how dominant could he become next season if everything finally clicks completely? One of the biggest reasons Eagles fans should feel confident about this team heading into 2026 is because the organization continues proving it can reload without completely falling apart. Most franchises in the NFL get one championship window and then spend years trying to recover after contracts become expensive, key veterans leave, or draft classes fail to produce enough talent. But Philadelphia keeps finding ways to stay ahead of the curve, and a huge reason for that is the aggressive mindset of Howie Roseman. Right now, people across the league are once again calling Howie the best general manager in football, and honestly, it is becoming harder and harder to argue against it. A recent ranking of NFL general managers placed Roseman at number 1 entering the 2026 season, ahead of some of the most respected executives in football. What makes that accomplishment even more impressive is the context behind it. This is not just about building one great roster. This is about adapting, rebuilding, correcting mistakes quickly, and keeping the Eagles competitive year after year, even as the league constantly changes around them. Think about what Philadelphia has accomplished under Roseman's leadership. The Eagles won championships with different head coaches, different quarterbacks, and completely different roster cores. That almost never happens in today's NFL. Most teams spend years chasing stability at quarterback alone, yet the Eagles managed to transition through multiple eras while remaining contenders. That level of organizational flexibility is rare, and it starts with the front office understanding when to evolve before problems become disasters. One of the clearest examples of that mentality came after the Carson Wentz era collapsed. Many franchises would have panicked after investing so much into a quarterback selected near the top of the draft. Instead, the Eagles pivoted aggressively, rebuilt the roster, trusted Jalen Hurts, and completely transformed the direction of the franchise. That decision changed everything, and what makes the situation even more impressive now is how Roseman continues finding impact players throughout the draft. The Eagles are no longer surviving purely because of stars. They are winning because the roster is layered with depth. Players like Jix Hunt are perfect examples of that philosophy working at a high level. Philadelphia drafted him in the 3rd round, developed him patiently, and now he looks capable of becoming one of the team's most dangerous defenders. Those are the types of moves that separate elite organizations from average ones. The scary part for the rest of the NFL is that the Eagles do not appear satisfied at all. Even after building one of the league's strongest rosters, Philadelphia continued attacking the offseason aggressively. They added more pass rush depth, reinforced the defense, and kept building the trenches because the organization understands exactly where championships are won. The Eagles want waves of defenders attacking offenses non-stop. They want fresh pass rushers rotating constantly, and they want quarterbacks feeling pressure from the opening snap until the final whistle. That philosophy could end up making Jix Hunt even more productive in 2026. Last season, Hunt produced 6.5 sacks, along with 55 pressures and 17 quarterback hits. Those are already strong numbers for a young edge rusher still developing his technique. But if the surrounding talent improves the overall pass rush even more, Hunt could suddenly find himself in far more favorable situations. Offensive lines will not be able to focus entirely on him because there are too many dangerous players surrounding him, and there is another important factor Eagles fans should pay attention to. Hunt still has room to grow technically. That is what makes his production so fascinating right now. He is still relatively inexperienced compared to many established NFL edge rushers because of his unusual football journey from safety to pass rusher. In other words, his ceiling may still be significantly higher than what fans already witnessed in 2025. Usually, when a player generates elite pressure rates this early while still learning the position, coaches become extremely excited about what the future could look like after more development. That is exactly why some people inside the league are quietly beginning to view him as one of the Eagles' most important long-term defensive pieces. And honestly, if this continues, Philadelphia's defense could become even more dangerous than people realize right now. You already have dominant interior talent. You already have speed across the defense. You already have experience experienced coaching under Vic Fangio. Now imagine adding a fully developed Jix Hunt into that equation. Suddenly, offenses are not just preparing for one superstar. They are preparing for constant chaos coming from every direction. That is how championship defenses are built. The Eagles have spent years investing heavily into the defensive line because they believe pressure changes games more than anything else. We saw it during their biggest playoff moments. We saw a quarterback struggle to survive against Philadelphia's front, and now another young pass rusher appears ready to take a massive leap at exactly the right time. At the same time, all of this keeps reinforcing why Howie Roseman's reputation continues growing across football. He corrected mistakes quickly, learned from previous draft failures, and completely changed the way Philadelphia approached roster construction. Instead of reaching for projects unnecessarily, the Eagles started prioritizing elite talent from major programs while still finding athletic upside later in drafts. That balance has helped create one of the deepest rosters in the NFL. And now the pressure shifts toward the rest of the conference. Because if Jix Hunt takes another major step forward in 2026, and if this Eagles defensive front becomes even stronger than it already was, Philadelphia may once again find itself positioned as one of the most feared teams in football. There is also something else happening here that Eagles fans cannot ignore anymore, and it may end up becoming one of the biggest reasons this team stays dominant over the next several years. Philadelphia is quietly building a culture where young players are developing much faster than expected, and that is becoming a massive competitive advantage for the organization. Look at the trajectory of players on this roster right now. You have young defenders stepping into major roles and immediately contributing. You have draft picks outperforming expectations. And most importantly, you have coaches putting players into positions where their strengths are maximized instead of forcing them into systems that do not fit their skill sets. That is exactly what happened with Jix Hunt. The Eagles recognized very early that his background as a former safety gave him tools most edge rushers simply do not possess. Instead of limiting him strictly to traditional pass rush responsibilities, they allowed him to become a more complete defender. That freedom unlocked a completely different layer to his game, and the results became obvious throughout the 2025 season. Quarterbacks struggled to identify where pressure was coming from. Offensive coordinators had difficulty predicting his assignments. One snap, he was exploding off the edge with pure speed, and the next snap, he was dropping into coverage, reading the quarterback's eyes. That versatility made him incredibly valuable inside Vic Fangio's defense because it created confusion before the ball was even snapped.